Welcome, everyone. Nick Wagner Sr. here. Welcome to another episode of the Full Potential Live Show. And I'm super excited to be with someone who I now consider a friend. And I will say this before we start, Pete. I often don't meet people, and after I meet them, say, "Wow, I feel underaccomplished." But when I met you and David Salinas, that's exactly how I felt, which is a rare thing because you guys have done so much in your short careers. So we'll dive into all of that, but I want to welcome Pete Sena to the show tonight. So Pete, thanks for joining.
Pleasure. Good to be here.
And so every Sunday night we do this 8 o'clock Eastern time. We record the show live and we stream it to LinkedIn and YouTube. And then we take the audio and we just turn it into the podcast, the Full Potential Podcast. And then I release it on all our favorite podcast platforms. So as I was telling Pete, we'll make sure that we get all of his details with his LinkedIn, personal LinkedIn page, and Digital Surgeons, the company that he owns. We'll link those in the show notes, and then we'll share this on the YouTube, the full YouTube recording tomorrow on all the in social media pages, and then we'll share the podcast, which is on Google Podcast, Apple, Spotify, etc. We'll share that on Tuesday. So Pete, let's kick it off. I love asking this question. So let's say pre-COVID, you go to a trade show or a conference, and you meet someone for the first time.
Sure.
What is the 2-minute elevator pitch when someone asks you, who is Pete Sena?
Not to be confused with the guy who body slams people, John Cena.
Yes. Are you not related? Are you?
No.
Okay.
So my last name's Sena. It's funny. I never correct people, but I just had this great visual of being a WWF superstar, and I guess I'll return to my normal self now. It's a great question, Nick, and I think it really depends on who I'm talking to. One of my first things that I would like to do is I've never really been the extrovert networker type. So for me, I would like to know who I'm talking to. So depending on who I'm talking to, I'll typically reveal a part of myself that I think is similar to that person. So you and I both have a big passion for technology. So if I met you and we were chatting and I knew that you had a background in IT, leadership, I would start to tell you about what I do with businesses, which is help people design marketing calendars and marketing solutions and technology solutions to build their brand. So I would probably keep it very simple or parochial. But if I'm at a conference with a bunch of designers, I would say I'm a design founder and entrepreneur. I run an innovation marketing company called Digital Surgeons, and we help drive businesses of all shapes and sizes forward. So you'll notice like there's a big difference depending on who I'm talking to, just to make sure that I'm not spitting a bunch of buzzwords that don't mean something, nothing to something,
I think what you said is spot on. I think kind of depending on who your audience is and who you're working with, what you tailor the conversation to, it varies, right? So
absolutely.
You mentioned you're a big fan of technology. I know you're a big fan of cars. So let's talk about the technology piece. Have you been a fan of technology since you were a little kid, or
Yep.
no?
Oh yeah.
You were.
Yeah, I started coding when I was a kid.
So how did you get into coding? Like, what was it playing games and that kind of was the gateway to computers in general, or was there something else?
I've been into computers since I was a kid. I think for me, it was as a shy, introverted kid, it was my gateway into being able to make things. So I remember playing video games as a kid, and I was just super into everything, just enamored by video games. And I was like, how are these things made? So one of the things that, I'm in the business of curiosity, Nick. That's what I tell people all the time. So I've been curious since I was a little kid. So for me, being able to understand how these games got made, and then learning that they were made with software development and coding. So then I started getting into that, started building computers. One of my first jobs was literally, I was cleaning the toilets for I convinced the guy at a local computer shop. Remember back in the day when people used to still build computers? I know, Nick, you and I are.
Yeah. No,
some of the younger folks might not know that because they just buy everything off the shelf. But I basically convinced a local computer store owner to let me basically shadow there, and get paid like minimum wage or whatever, and basically clean up the place, clean the toilets, clean the bathrooms, whatever. Really gross job, but it got me around computers. And then I really quickly made friends with the people that were building the computers, that were doing the diagnostics, repairing software, hardware issues, et cetera. And then from there, just fell in love with it. So everything from software to hardware to just design and art in general was where my fascination for that came from. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Did you used to build desktop computers when you were a kid?
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what was like can you share with us, this is going to be a really geeky for all the nerds out there, but one of the desktop computers you built and the specs and the year you built it.
The year I don't remember. I'd have to
How old were you?
I was probably well, I guess I can do the math on this and figure this out. I was probably 15, maybe 14 years old, if I had to guess. 15.
All right.
About that.
So like somewhere in the 90s.
Yeah, somewhere in the 90s. I was born in 82. So
what'd you build?
So I built at that time. I think it was it was either a Pentium 2 or a Pentium 3 PC with I think I had an NVIDIA graphics card in there at the time because I wanted it to be, gaming compatible. I had a high speed 56K modem in there because you got a, but it was like the one that had the higher baud rate, so the upload was a little bit higher. I think it was a Motorola Ethernet card or something like that. So I remember, like, again, now we're probably losing lots of our audience right now with this talk. But yeah, no, I mean, I am a full-fledged nerd. Don't let the collared shirt, which I put on for you, fool you, Nick.
No, but I think I bring it up because I know you're a technologist at heart, and what you do now, you run a digital marketing company, but it really is based off of technology, right? And technology drives everything you guys do. So totally. Not everyone has built not all the kids build computers these days anymore because you can just buy a laptop. I think the hardcore gamers still do, but so was that computer job your first paying job, working in that computer store, or did you do something before that?
That was my first like W-2 paying job. I mean, obviously before that, I was always like fixing like family friends' computers and stuff, like whenever they would download a virus or whatever. So my dad was always pimping me out to his, whatever friend or local person that we knew to basically help. I spent most of my Saturdays helping people realize how to remove spyware or adware from their computers. Back when it was like, now it's like you can Google anything. But back then it was like, being able to help someone, diagnose an issue on Windows 95 or Windows 98 or whatever it was. Like, it actually required skill back then. Now it's a Google search, but
you needed a computer guy to fix it, or a computer girl, right? So that's the thing. So what did so you're in high school, you love computers. Was your plan always to go to college to study computers, or
no, not at all. I wanted to be a game designer.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to be a game designer. I was gonna go out west. I got into a bunch of really good schools actually, and to potentially go and explore that. And then sort of, long story short, the path took a different direction. Ended up at UConn here in Connecticut, great school. And that was sort of where the fork in the road for me started to show up. And I use that term a lot, Nick. And for those that are listening, I'm a big person. I don't believe in or. My entire philosophy, my principles from who I am and who we are for the multiple companies that I'm involved in or a part of running, I always tell people to find their and. So for me, what I mean by the fork in the road was I had a large group of people that wanted me to be a computer scientist and, only go to school for engineering, computer engineering, software engineering, et cetera. And then I was also very artistic, specifically with digital media. So, I taught myself Photoshop when I think I was like 11, 12 years old. I got pretty graphically inclined from a very young age as well. So I had like all the communication design and art related folks kind of pulling me in that direction. And really it was that fork in the road where I had some decisions to make. And the decision that I made was I didn't want to go in just one of those directions. So I sort of forged a hybrid path forward. And I'm really glad I did, because now it's very commonplace for people to have, the STEM and STEAM kind of collaboration. Obviously, one of the big things that, my co-founder Dave and I are a big part of is, with bringing Holberton School here to New Haven, Connecticut. So I'm an engineer at heart, and it's funny. Like an hour before I jumped on this webinar with you, I was writing code. I was teaching somebody how to use processing, which is a primarily based on Java, but you can do it in different languages too. So for me, like every chance I get, I'm nerding out on something because I'm obsessed with learning, and it's just that's the one thing I think that all of the paths that I've taken have had in common is just always really being curious as to like what's a different way to do something, or what's a way that I could connect these dots together, whether it be with code or pixels or people or whatever that is. So now you're definitely striking my passion point for sure. So thanks for that.
Well, no, I mean, and I think it's when you think of people that do computer science, right? I mean, I think you obviously have to have, and it's funny because Sena, who mentioned there was an echo, Sena's a computer science person himself that I know. It takes a certain type of person to be a computer scientist and understand how all this works, right? Not everyone, I almost think sometimes we underestimate how difficult it is to be a computer scientist and what it takes to go into it. But and to do the craft well, right? So I mean, I think a lot of people can code, but to be like an actual software engineer, I think are two different things, right? Just because I think if you're designing really complicated systems, there's a lot that goes into it. So when you were at UConn, getting you didn't go into game design, you went down the computer science route. At what point did you realize that you were going to start your own company that turned into Digital Surgeons, right? Because was that your plan all along? Was you were going to go off and start your own company, or
no?
What was if you look back to college, what was your plan for a job when you were done with school?
So it's interesting. So I want to answer your question, but through a different lens that I think the viewers would really find helpful, especially knowing some of the folks that are tuning into this tonight. So the first thing that I think any entrepreneur does is most entrepreneurs either create a business out of necessity, right? So they need to find a way to survive or thrive, or they see a problem in the world that they just really, really want to fix that's not being serviced or solved in a way that they believe that they could solve it. So from my perspective, I would say from a young age, I always had many of the traits that you see in entrepreneurs specifically. So the curiosity, the drive to novelty, and being able to create something new and unique. So to answer your question, when I always assumed that I would end up, at some big company and helping them, forge a path forward. One of the first places I got my kind of start or opportunity was working with a lot of large organizations and corporations, right? So working with ESPN, working with some larger ad agencies, that was where I really discovered that this digital thing that I knew how to do was a really unique skill. And I didn't think it was unique because that's how I spent all my nights, all my weekends. Like for me, that was life. And I think to a large degree, it still is, right? And I think that passion for where I wanted to take things, I didn't see it here, right? So I had a choice. I could go to California, which I spent a little bit of time out there, but my friends are here, my family's here. And there's just something special about Connecticut. I know you and I share that passion. It's one of the things that really helped create our friendship and our relationship, right? And ultimately, I wanted to bring all these different things together: problem solving, creativity, design, technology, engineering, and sort of bring them underneath one roof. And that's what I ended up doing with Digital Surgeons. And in the beginning, it was much more like the sort of rebel spirit of trying to do something differently. But, very, very quickly, Nick, what happened was people started wanting to get on that train with me. And I attracted some really amazing and talented people, some of which still to this day are with me and call Digital Surgeons their home. And some of which have gone on to do amazing things. I have, some of my early folks that were on the team, either as freelancers or full-time employees, they're now doing amazing things. Some of them have, technology businesses that they run or are a part of. Many of them have gone to work for large corporations and are doing really powerful, interesting, amazing things. So I think really I tell you that story because I want someone to hear this who might not be aware of where they're going, or perhaps they just got met with some massive amount of change because of this COVID-19 stuff, right? And now they're thinking about what they're going to do next, right? Mm-hmm. So the thing is, like, you paid me the best compliment, and I'm super grateful for it earlier, which I didn't have a chance to acknowledge until this moment. But, you talked about accomplishments. It's funny, I look at you and I see you as this, extremely talented and successful, organizational leadership coach and developer. And I look at you and your accomplishments and say, okay, wow, he's had his own business. He's worked for a major corporation doing amazing things. So for me, I think I also have a bit of that imposter syndrome where when I hear someone say you're accomplished, I'm like, well, am I accomplished? Like, I guess by what score, right? Because when I keep score, my internal score is like, I'm always 10 yards away from the touchdown, right? So that's how I look at things. And I think that desire to continue to progress no matter where I'm at, I think is the thing that keeps me curious and keeps me hunting and going forward. So I don't know if that's valuable and answers the question, but kind of sparked a passion for me, which is when everyone's going left, sometimes you have to go right.
No, I think a lot of things you said align with the way I think quite a bit. I think I want to get back to, so how did this actually begin though, right? So how did Digital Surgeons start? Because there's always fun stories about how companies began, right? So you graduated from UConn. You said you mentioned you had some other opportunities at some other firms, and ESPN included. How did you decide? Well, how did you get hooked up with David Salinas, who was your co-founder, and how did you guys create Digital Surgeons? Like, was it, you each chipped in a couple bucks and just started finding clients out of your basement or car, or like how did this what was the birth of Digital Surgeons like? I think is what I want to know.
Well, it was a dark and stormy night.
Yeah.
And it's a great question, and I'll be being in branding and marketing. One of the things that I do for a living is help create behavior change for organizations and brands, right? So I think there's a part of me that instantly wants to tell you this amazing story about this company that came together and was forged in fire and amazing things. But the radical candorous truth here is Digital Surgeons was founded, like most companies, because I saw a need to solve the problems that people were having with digital in their organizations. The reason I named it Digital Surgeons was because I was always getting I was inheriting a bunch of messy deliverables. So it was either poorly coded software or people that missed their deadlines or whatever it was. So I had to come in and we never used surgeon metaphors at all with the brand. So whoever watches this on my team, don't give me crap for it. But basically, always getting in there, always having to basically be precise and take things apart, put them back together, and make them better, right? So that's where Digital Surgeons was born. In the beginning, it was just me. I had a childhood friend that I brought on as a developer. He was, very accomplished, very young, talented coder. And it was me and him, and everything else just had to figure it out. So it was, it was a DBA before it was an LLC. It was a small thing. And it started out as simple as just making websites or building lightweight applications. So whether it be a web app or a native app, whatever it is, we built anything that people hired us to do. In the beginning, it was, just solving problems with design and code, right? Very much just passion for the craft and passion for making really interesting things on the internet. That was the real true reality of the origin story. I think it didn't really become a business until I met Dave Salinas, right? And I hope he's tuning into this or watches this in the future, because this is one of the few times I'll say some nice things about him. So hopefully he hears it. I'm obviously joking, but so I met Dave Salinas because he is and always was a very much a serial entrepreneur. He had a number of different businesses that he was involved in that ran the gamut of different things. And one of the businesses that he had, if you don't know this, Dave's really into music, so much that he wanted to, open up a studio. And it was just sort of a hobbyist side business that he had. It was never going to be his full-time business, but he just had a passion for it, right? So like many things, he invested in his passion. He found some talented people. Turns out one of the people was very, very talented sound engineer, was actually living with one of our creative directors, and they were good friends. And basically, one person said to the other person, just like anything, it's not what you know, it's who you know. They said, hey, you got to meet this guy, Pete. Dave, he knows about computers and stuff. And it literally, that was like how he introduced us, right? So I met Dave. Anybody who knows Dave knows
you can remove spyware from computers, like computers.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's like I could also write spyware and put it on your computer, but that's a whole separate conversation for another night. But jokes aside, so I think what ended up happening there, Nick, was basically I met Dave, and Dave saw a lot in me. What he saw was I'm using his words, not mine, right? These are things he said many times over the years. We've been partners for over 10 years. We've started, I think, over 5 companies together, District, Digital Surgeons, the list goes on and on, right? But one thing that happened was when Dave and I met, that's where he saw what could be a business on Digital Surgeons. He saw the skills that I had and that at the time that one other person had. And he was like, wow, I can sell this. Dave's extremely strategic. He understands how to connect dots. He understands how to build relationships. These are all things, a shy, introverted, kid from Milford, Connecticut doesn't know about, right? So we basically put together, $5,000 in credit cards, and the two of us sort of chipped in, like you asked earlier, and Digital Surgeons, the business that we know today, was born. And by the business we know today, what I mean specifically was he was out selling websites, marketing, applications, web applications. We call it UI, UX, and customer experience now, but back then it was like helping people get their business on the internet, helping people make money on the internet, right? So just to sort of take the buzzwords out. And that was really the origin story of Digital Surgeons. And, lo and behold, we were blessed enough to have a great partnership, which we still do to this day. We've gone on to launch other things. Obviously now I'm sort of running Digital Surgeons, and he's running District, which is our tech and innovation campus in New Haven, for those that aren't aware. And that's really been the origin story, the journey. And then from there, brick by brick, we would add and add and add, brought on some incredible, talented people to join and be a part of the vision and the mission. And, now here we are today, 14 plus years later, and we're working with, startups that are getting funding. We're working with Fortune 50s, and everything in between. So, we get to work with some of the greatest people and the greatest brands and businesses on the planet. And it's a fun job, but again, it's like anything, it's a roller coaster, right? And I think if we can all see one thing, it's, right now with, here we are in our homes, we'd be on this show on our home regardless because of the time slot, right? But, normally tomorrow we'd all get up, we'd go to work, right? I'd go to my really awesome tech campus. You'd go to your big corporate job, Nick. And, but now tomorrow we're going to wake up and dial in. So I hope that's helpful or informative to the group.
No, it was. And I want to unpack a little bit about the last 14 years and the ride with Digital Surgeons, right? So clearly the company's grown. It was originally just you and one developer. Then you hook up with Dave. You guys grow. You add more people. He's selling business. You eventually move into your own location, right? And the company continues to grow. You are Dave's really the one out selling the business, and you're the one really, I would say, probably back at the shop, leading the actual creation of things, is my understanding, correct?
Oh yeah. No question.
So you're the one taking what Dave's selling, building it, taking the vision and building it and turning it into reality, which I think,
and driving up the stock price of Red Bull and Starbucks in the process, because typically Dave would bring me some very audacious challenges over the years.
Yes, I can imagine.
That were always fun to solve. So, again, I got very cranky and my teams got cranky in the process, but I think it's that I wouldn't be where I am right now, and I wouldn't have been able to work with everyone from Lady Gaga to Kanye West to some of the biggest leaders on the planet if it wasn't for someone like Dave just pushing the ever-living crap out of me. I don't know if we can swear, so I'll try to not swear on this, but just pushing the crap out of me to make sure that me and our teams are pushing. I think what is really critical in anything is partnership. And partnership doesn't necessarily have to be in business, just in life, right? But yeah, to answer the question, the ride was challenging. It still is. It's still to this day, now more than ever with everything with this COVID stuff. But I'm grateful for the partnership. I'm grateful for the opportunity to continue to forge a path forward that not a lot of people are doing. There's not a lot of companies in the middle of Connecticut that do some of the stuff that we do. Lots of companies in California, Silicon Valley, New York, Chicago, not a lot of companies here that do it. And I think that, to me, I have a lot of pride in, and it's a big reason I work with you. Obviously, we talk a lot about Connecticut Comeback. A lot of amazing things happening in this state that I'm just so excited for the Full Potential show to be able to get this out there. I watched a couple of your previous episodes and just getting ready for today, and you got some awesome folks on there. So
no, I appreciate that. So I want to talk about the shift that happened in what maybe I think it was the past 2 years, where Dave stepped away from digital surgeons to really focus on district and Holberton School, and pretty much left you in charge, right, of digital surgeons. So you're acting CEO now by yourself. How has that changed for you, right? So how is your day-to-day and what you're responsible for changed with Dave pulling back and you leading the company now? Because you mentioned like your passion is like you're a computer science guy, right? So now you're running the whole company, and you're probably not as focused on the delivery of the actual end product, because you have so many other responsibilities as CEO. So tell us a little bit about how that's changed what you do every day, and maybe how that stretched you as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's definitely, it stretched me in a good way and it stretched me in a bad way, and I'll be the first to tell you that. So let me just first start by clarifying one thing. I am by no means running Digital Surgeons by myself. I have an incredible, amazing leadership team that enable me in so many ways. So for any of you that listen to this, thank you for all the work that you've done to this day and all the work that you're going to be doing in the future to keep pushing DS forward. I think the major shift, Nick, that happened is that Dave and I were kind of like co-CEOs, right? We were both running the business together since day one. While his responsibilities were primarily focused on strategic partnerships and business development, so a lot of sales and marketing and aspects of that, my focus at the time, early when we were much smaller, was on delivering the work product. So it was a combination of building the customer relationships, coming up with the solutions or strategies, whatever words you want to use, and then making sure that we're architecting the right campaigns to drive change or progress. So sometimes those are creative campaigns, sometimes they're technology campaigns. So Nick, when David and I were partners, the nice thing about that is if you have 100 things come in, you can sort of chop them up, and somebody gets 50 of them, the other person gets 50 of them, or whatever those things are. One of the first things that I realized is in my career, I did not, one of the things that I talk to you about a lot is understanding people and being a good leader. I didn't know what the hell that meant. And, I think that David and I, we're not MBAs from, wherever. So a lot of what we learned on the job. We made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of things I'm not proud of, just, classic leadership mistakes. So one day, hopefully there'll be a book about that, and hopefully I don't have to write it. But the biggest thing I noticed when Dave, and I want to be clear, it wasn't stepping away, it was Digital Surgeons is a service-based business, right? So we provide a service for organizations. Service businesses in themselves, the business model of them doesn't scale because it's directly correlated to people. So, after you get to a certain point of revenue, profit becomes a function of just, how do you manage your expenses and continue to drive revenue? Basic economics, very simple B school equation, right? So the challenge there was what David and I realized was early on, going back about 5 years ago, we wanted to diversify our wealth strategy. So both from an economic perspective as well as just a business model perspective. So we invested in a number of different ventures, some of which are still doing well to this day, some of which didn't go so well. So we experimented quite a bit. And I think what our strengths helped us realize was really where Dave is strong and where I'm strong and where we both want to play and don't want to play. So when David stepped away, the first thing I felt, Nick, was I felt a bit alone. I felt a bit overwhelmed with the fact that, how am I going to, be able to fill in the big shoes that Dave, filled in for so long as my partner and my co-founder. So I think that was the first struggle, is realizing now that my role was going to evolve to one that was much more holistic, where every aspect of the business was one that now I needed to care for, whether I directly cared for it or, hired folks or contractors or whatever it was to be able to help care for it. So first thing I think was just a disproportionate amount of workload, which honestly almost killed me. I a couple of years ago almost had a nervous breakdown, struggling with some mental health issues, which I talk about a lot because I think it inspires people. Mental health challenges are, really prevalent in people who have complex, problem-solving skills. So I see it a lot with designers, engineers, et cetera. It's not specific to those industries, but I see it over-indexes in those industries. So for me, being able to, find meditation and find good techniques for self-care, that was a critical thing. But the first thing I realized when I had to sort of unpack what now was mine to care for, because obviously we're both owners in the organization.
Right.
What I realized really quickly was I couldn't do it alone. And that was really what I realized was, it's not these people serving me, it's me serving these people. And by these people, I mean my employees, my clients, et cetera. So that was the big shift for me, Nick, that I have been just doubling down and to try to level up in, right? Because it's like I can code in 10 languages and, design in 10 different programs, but trying to figure out how to deal with, a pandemic where you have people who have small children at home and figuring out HR issues around that. And that's not my bag, right? So what I realized is, and I'm talking present day, but obviously going back a couple of years.
Of course.
David's been running district for, I think, a little over 3 years now, where he's not been an acting executive member of Digital Surgeons, but he's, very much involved, obviously on the board and, advising the company and very much aware of everything that's happening. And, we still have to this day a tremendous partnership. So I just want to make sure I clarify that for anybody listening to this is like, what we've realized is how do you make sure that you can focus on all these different growth levers? It's about focus and it's about passion and putting people in the right seats in the bus, like Jim Collins talks about in his great book, Good to Great.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a lot of good points. So, I'm glad to hear that you found a lot of techniques to help with the mental health struggles you were having, which is, I've shared online as well. I deal with anxiety and I share that with people because I think that if people can see us and see that, hey, like we're successful, normal people with productive lives and have mental health issues, then maybe the stigma will go away, right? Is my hope. So kudos to you for sharing that as well. But you bring up a lot of really interesting points around focus and you quickly realize that you couldn't do this by yourself. And it's funny because I think, you solve a lot of problems with technology. I'll tell you right now that people are way more difficult to figure out than technology, right? Because people are always the hardest part of any equation is what I found. And I can say that and laugh about it because I've dealt with my fair share of people challenges. So
Complex adaptive systems. They
Yes.
don't run a standard IO loop where you can debug the code, and
No,
just
they
when you
do
think
not.
just when you think you figured them out, a life change or something happens and a chemical happens up here and you're dealing with different things. So yeah, no, it's
Absolutely. Yeah.
For sure.
No, that makes me laugh. So let's talk about so digital surgeons. I mean, obviously you guys are really successful, but let's hear what would you consider your biggest success of your career with digital surgeons, and then your biggest failure with your career with digital surgeons. Let's hear the success and the failure, both sides of the coin.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's one that I don't think about as much as I should have. So give me a moment to process that. I would say my biggest failure really is realizing early on. So, Nick, you introduced me to the Gallup Strength Finder, right? And we were, had the privilege of being able to work with you and some of our leaders to be able to understand just what that is as a technique and how it can be applied. So for those of you that aren't aware of this, maybe you can explain it in just a moment, just because I think it'd be valuable for the audience to hear this,
Yeah.
Nick. But specifically, I think my biggest, I would say, epic failure really was not realizing what my core strengths and weaknesses were early on. And I think that there's a lot of hubris and there's a lot of ego that many entrepreneurs have. I think that as a software...
Pause there for 1 second. You have to have an ego as an entrepreneur, because if you didn't, you would never do something as crazy as start your own business. So I think you have to have that, right?
Yeah, amen. But I say that because I think there was a lot of times in my career where I would sort of defer to, being a martyr or a one-man army. And, I did a lot of things that I think early on, and I think I'm hoping that those that know me for a long time and have seen how I show up in recent times, you can see the contrast. I'm hoping. So we'll see what comes out in the comments, right? But I think, it's an ever evolving thing. So the biggest epic failure, I would say, is not realizing what was or wasn't possible, and more specifically, where I should focus my energy and where David should focus his energy, and where certain people on the team. I would say the biggest mistake that I made, I also helped lead to some of the happiest moments of my career, which is the first thing that I did when I got out of school and I started Digital Surgeons was I hired all my friends. And what that led to was a lot of some of the best moments ever, right? Because it's like you're working with your friends doing stuff. But now, still to this day, I'm having to right wrongs or mistakes, when it creates a strife on a friendship, or it creates a diversity problem, right? Because, a lot of my friends were not from all over the parts of the world. There wasn't a wide spectrum of gender diversity or different things. So being able to work through those things took years, quite frankly. So the foundation of something is such a critical thing. So I think my biggest failure is just making a set of mistakes based on, or making decisions based on lack of information or lack of good judgment, based on expertise, right? So when you're trying to figure this thing out, you make massive mistakes. So I would say that led to, some big setbacks for us early on. I think, we would have achieved many of the goals that we set that we didn't achieve over the years had we taken that differently. So I think really it's just like getting out of my own way. I'd say it was probably one of the biggest failures. Certainly there was, a couple of projects that I'm going to protect the innocent by not putting those names out there. But I think there was a couple of projects that I knew in my gut that I should have walked away from, but I didn't. And over the years that took a financial or an emotional or a psychological toll on me and others that I'm associated with. So my employees, my contractors, et cetera. So I would say just big failures. Those are some of the big failures, is just like not getting out of my own way and realizing where I'm strong and what makes us different and better. When you're building a business, sometimes all money looks the same. And if I can share one lesson with everyone that's going to listen to this now or in the future, it's not all money is the same. You want to go after smart money, go after purpose-driven money. And I know that's probably easier said than done right now, where a lot of people are hurting and having a challenging time. This is being recorded during the COVID fallout, right? But before that, I would say that those were some of the bigger challenges. Biggest successes. So great question, Nick. I would say there's a couple of moments that play back in the highlight reel when I listen through. I think one of them was using the thing that I loved most to create opportunity. So as a designer, technologist, I was very early on a lot of platforms, right? So Twitter at the time was not, as, widely used or aware of. Again, you can say if you love it or hate it, doesn't matter. But, I met our head of technology, and one of my newest partners in Digital Surgeons on the internet, in that medium. So I think, being able to have people like him, come all the way from the UK here to America to help us build this business. And we've got many stories just like that, really just where we've attracted incredible people. And we've gotten lucky because of just being in the right place at the right time. So I would say some of those moments are getting really great people on the team. Obviously, a lot of projects over the years stick out to me. I mean, when we won the Webby for Gaga's workshop, obviously that was incredible. To be able to take my then girlfriend, now wife, to, one of the coolest events in New York City and meet everybody. The story that she tells everyone is Blake Lively told her she was pretty. It really did happen. My wife's gorgeous, so that we're lucky. But again, those are the kind of high point moments, right? That the sort of, but I don't want to make that about celebrity, because I think the problem with our industry right now, specifically marketing and advertising, is that there is a veneer of magnetism and attraction that comes with it that I think has a dark side too that we're probably not going to get to on this conversation, but I want to just make sure I highlight it. But some moments for me, I mean, being able to be one of the partners in district and see us literally erect a campus from an old bus depot into one of the hottest places to be at in Connecticut. And I can say that because I was just a tiny, tiny, tiny sliver of being a part of that, right? So there's no ego about that. And I think, being able to say I'm a partner in that, and having really created a San Francisco-like environment in, New Haven, Connecticut, definitely one of my biggest accolades that I would say. But really for me, it's some of the good that I've been able to do. Like for me, like all those big glitz and glamour campaigns. Again, I worked with some of the coolest clients on the planet that by celebrity terms, if you will, right? But for me, what gets me up in the morning is the work we're doing with Holberton School, right? Who I know there's a couple of engineers on from the school right now, like being able to see that video and how much I'm affecting people's lives simply by putting it out there. Being able to speak at a conference with 400 people and have people come up to me after in tears, telling me how much it meant to them that I had mentioned mental health that they were struggling with, and talked about techniques, or mentioned, the fact that I was, a middle-class kid that, grew up. I was one of the first kids in my family and extended family to finish college and go to college. Right. So, there's a whole other side of that story. But for me, the stories that I remember are all the people I've helped. I always say, like, I'm an unlocker. So what I aim to do for people and businesses is unlock progress. And that's why I love this Full Potential show, because for me, it's like, how do you achieve full potential? You need good partners. You need to be able to have access to people. So I'm trying to provide that access that I didn't necessarily have, that I had to go and create. And I think David would say the same thing if he was on the show as my co-founder.
Well, so I think it's interesting, and I appreciate you sharing those stories. And I think for anyone who hasn't owned their own business, it is such an emotional roller coaster, like you said. The emotions, the highs are high, the lows are low, like nothing you've ever experienced in a corporate job, because a corporate job is just so different from running your own business. So
totally.
So I think you articulated that well, and shared some of the to try to give people like a window into your world of being an entrepreneur. I think you bring up a really good point about you mentioned Clifton Strengths, which for those that don't know, it's an online assessment it's owned by Gallup, and you take like about a 45-minute questionnaire, and it ends up sharing with you what are your, you should get your top 5 or your full 34, like what are your 34 strengths. And the whole premise behind it is focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses. And if you focus on your strengths, you're going to be more successful both personally and at work. And right. I almost feel that between you finding out what your strengths are, and Dave also having this just, unbelievable enthusiasm for who you are and what he thought you could do, really pushed you in a direction that I think has helped you be so successful, right? So I mean, clearly he thought highly of you and saw something in you that maybe you didn't even yourself realize that you had, right?
No question.
Yeah. And I think it's sometimes you meet those people that just push you to do things that you never thought were possible, or you never envisioned yourself doing, and then you do it and you're like, wow, right? So and I always try to explain to people that that's what, great friends, great business partners, great mentors, great whatever you want to call these people, right? Those people that inspire you, it doesn't matter who they are or where they come from, but sometimes they just change you, right, for the better. So I love how you kind of shared that, because I think that's really powerful. And I think back to what you said about you guys have obviously had a lot of success with Digital Surgeons and with District. And for those that don't know what District is, it is an innovation. I guess the best way to talk about it's an innovation co-working campus in New Haven, Connecticut. I can't remember how many square feet it is, but it's massive, because it used to be a bus depot you guys converted, and that's where Digital Surgeons is now calls home, as well as I can't tell you how many other companies and other people in the co-working space. But
yeah, we've got over 100 companies there right now. Yeah,
you guys have had so much success, but I love how one of the things that you mentioned that you really, I think, enjoyed the most is helping people, because I think it gets to the point where once you're successful, how do you give back, right? How do you give back to what others are? The Holberton's a great example of what you guys are doing. Is you're giving back by starting the Holberton School, because you yourself saw how technology changed your life, right? And that's exactly what Holburton is doing, is just changing students' lives by introducing them to technology and helping them become, this sort of technologist. So I appreciate you joining and obviously jumping on here and taking the time to be with us tonight. I know you have a lot going on with digital surgeons, especially in the middle of a global pandemic. But I want to close with one last question. So I always ask every guest, my last question is, what is that one piece of advice that you would give to my listeners that's helped you reach your full potential? So what is that one thing that has made Pete so successful during your, and I think you still have a relatively short career because you and I are still relatively young, right? We got a lot more time to work. So during your relatively short career, what is that one thing that's helped you be so successful?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So one of our core values at Digital Surgeons is adapt and respond. So I'm a firm believer that the only constant in life is change. And I think people's ability to be more like a thermostat and less like a thermometer is a really critical thing. So what I mean by that, for those that haven't heard me use that metaphor, so if you think about a thermometer just reads the temperature, right? So it reads the situation around it and it reacts to its environment. Versus a thermostat that you set the thermostat to a particular temperature, whether it's higher or lower, and much like a conductor of an orchestra, it sets the cadence, right? It's the drum beat that allows things to happen. So to answer the question, I think it's critical that you understand the things that you do want to do. And in order to get to that, sometimes you have to understand the things you don't want to do, right? So I made the mistake a long time ago of telling someone that they need to find their passion. It was the worst advice I ever gave, because the person said to me, well, that's easy for you to say because you know what you're passionate about. And I got corrected and humbled very quickly. So what I would say is, you're going to fail, you're going to fall down, you're going to get your ass kicked. Life is going to kick your ass, whether it's in business or personal or love or whatever it is. And it's not about how you behave or how you act and react when you fail. It's about how you respond after that, right? So I think the one thing that I would say, which continues to have me get back up every single day, and God knows I've got my butt kicked a number of times in all walks and talks of life, I think it's a willingness and a desire to fail and continue to fail forward over and over and over again. I think what we glorify in this country and in the world is these unicorns, these overnight successes. When the reality is, most of these businesses are 10, 20, 30 years old in some cases, that we call overnight successes. So what I would say to anyone watching, the best way to achieve full potential is to put in the effort and put in the work. And what I mean by that is to always be in a state where you are adapting and responding to your environment, and you are adapting and responding to the things that are in front of you and that are around you. So if you go into it eyes wide open and you put in that effort and you don't just react negatively. So I was talking to someone this weekend, they just recently lost their job, and they've been out of work for over 2 weeks. And I said, well, what have you been doing? And they said, well, I just got through three seasons of Ozark on Netflix. And I said, okay, well, what do you think you're going to do next? That I want to hold space for you. Like, that makes sense. Maybe you need some time to disconnect. I don't know what that's like. I'm going to listen. And then I said, well, what do you want to do next? And the person's, for 2 weeks has been just binge watching TV at home without work. And this is something I have extremely high esteem for. And if you listen to it, hopefully you finish listening to what I'm about to say about you without using your name. And I said to the person, I said, what is it that you want to do next? And they said, I don't know. And I said, well, what are you doing about it? What are you doing about it is the question I always ask people. It's like, if you're not happy, what are you doing about it? And I think that that's the problem that most people are going to face, why they don't reach their full potential, is that they're afraid to try, they're afraid to fail, and they're afraid of what people think about them. And look, I really care. I care too much what people think about me. But one thing that I will say is, I haven't even come close to reaching my full potential yet. But I think the only way for me to do it, and the only way I've seen others do it, is by just continuing to adapt and respond and be that thermostat, not the thermometer. So I hope that's helpful for those listening to it. Nick, super grateful for the time. I'll talk to you anytime, so we don't have to be on live stream to do that. But
I know, great. And I appreciate. I think that's great. Absolutely fantastic advice. And I think you're 100% right that people are afraid to fail. And I even see it in my second grader. He's afraid to get just homework wrong. Right? He's so nervous about getting. I'm like, don't worry about getting it wrong. I'm like, I get stuff wrong all the time. you learn from it. And I try to explain that to him. I'm trying to ingrain that in him at a young age, that failure is okay, right? But we're taught in school that failure is not okay, for so many years. So I think that great advice. I really appreciate you sharing. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate everything you're doing for Connecticut with digital surgeons and district and Holbert and it was such a great conversation. And again, thank you for everyone who joined us, and for everyone who listened on the live stream and listened on the podcast. And if you want to get in touch with Pete, so we're going to make sure we have we'll have your link to your LinkedIn right in the show notes, in the show description, Pete, as well as the link to Digital Surgeons, and we'll link to District as well if anyone wants to check out District in New Haven. So thank you for joining. I appreciate it, and wish you and Digital Surgeons the best.
Thanks so much, Nick. And I would just say for the audience as well, if you guys have any questions, if you want me to elaborate on anything that we talked about tonight, like Nick mentioned, just shoot me a note. I'll try to get back to you as soon as I possibly can, but I'll definitely get back to everyone that reaches out, and just try to help however I can. So thanks so much, Nick. Wishing you and your family continued health. And if nothing else, if you ever want me to talk to your second grader about failure, I'd be more than happy to. So
I appreciate that. Thanks, Pete.
Awesome.